What is going on, my people? So today it's super exciting because I have an amazing guest, Attorney Musa Ghanayem, and this is the thing that I love about Musa. This is the memory that I remember about Musa, is the image of a bunch of reporters surrounding him, holding up a mic to his face, and he looks like the one soldier against an army of reporters. Kind of reminds me of Mike Tyson in the ring with all the security guards around him. It's just an iconic photo. So I am so happy that Musa is with me today, talking about what he loves to do. Musa, thank you for being on the show.
I'm honored that you have me. I really am.
So Musa, tell us a little bit about what you do. I know you're doing criminal defense work. You're mainly working out of Dekalb County. I know you're in Brookhaven, but tell us your connection to Dekalb County, the criminal defense world. Just what do you want us to know?
Well, I started doing criminal defense in 2001 when I got licensed, and I've worked both in Fulton and Dekalb County. I've done both sides as a prosecutor or as a defense attorney in Fulton, the public defender's office, and the prosecutor's office in Dekalb. So I feel like, I've built a good relationship with the community here, and I've just seemed to have found the law that I like the most in, representing people and defending their rights.
Very early on in my career, when I was in law school, I interned at the Dekalb County Solicitor General's office. And so I was helping the Assistant Solicitor Generals prosecute cases, because I felt like that was my calling. I want to be a prosecutor, and I felt that inherent in that role, I'm an advocate for justice, right? I mean, who should be more of an advocate for justice than the person that is prosecuting cases, right? But man, I mean, my world shattered when I realized what was happening in that Solicitor General's office. I mean, I felt things were taken out of context. I felt people were just deemed irredeemable. And I was like, no, if I'm going to do criminal work, I'm going to be a defense attorney, because I couldn't handle being a prosecutor. So what was your experience like?
Well, as a prosecutor and, it's prosecuting felonies, it's real easy to get behind some of those cases. So when you have some very serious cases that are sexual assault or homicide or something like that, and the evidence is clear and the defendant is going to trial because he really has no choice but to go to trial, it's very easy to get behind those kinds of cases. However, there were plenty of times where I remember interviewing police officers, and I felt as though they were willing to be dishonest in order to win. And it's not really about winning, right? It's about exacting the proper justice for the alleged crime that was committed. And if you can't prove it, you can't prove it. And that's the way that it was. And I realized that at that point, my services would be best used with these experiences fighting for people's rights instead of to continue to subvert people's rights. In my experience, and let me tell you, so when I started doing this, all right, prosecutors had less strikes and jury strikes, okay? They could only strike 6 to the 12 that we could strike as defense, because the defendant's rights were paramount. The defendant is the one on trial. His rights are paramount. The entire Constitution is the only thing protecting him from the United States of America and whichever state you live in, right? Then they got rid of that, and they made it equal strikes to make it easier to convict someone. Then the defense used to be able to close, the final close, in closing arguments. There's a thing called primacy and recency. These things help jurors remember the first and the last thing they hear. And now they've taken that away from defense attorneys too. Why? It's not as if your client isn't the one whose life is on the line. And during that time, more rights have gone away. more hearsay evidence is able to be introduced. More evidence of crimes that didn't happen with this crime or crimes that happened in the past are allowed to be introduced. And when I realized that this is what was happening, I realized I was on the wrong side of the law. Okay? We can't have our rights being slowly diminished. That's not what this is about. Protecting the Constitution doesn't mean closing it to people. It means expanding it. It means to provide rights to people, not to take them away.
It's so interesting that you say that, because your username on Instagram and TikTok is legally blind. Legally_blind 2000 on Instagram, and on TikTok it's legally blind. And that's something that, you know, sometimes we use it as just a cliche term that justice is blind, but sometimes it's not.
It's not. And there are influences that you have to come up against. And those influences are extrajudicial. They have nothing to do with the law. Okay?
Yeah.
And these are also things that have been done. Now they've given victims victims of crimes deserve all the grace and respect in the world. However, they are not technically a constitutional party to a criminal case. So giving them constitutional rights is counterproductive to our entire criminal justice system. And in Georgia, now the state can barely do anything without the okay of the victim. And that hamstrings and makes almost impossible the ability for someone to resolve a case organically.
So I think it's legally_blinding, right?
Yes.
Legally_blinding. So you were a DeKalb County prosecutor. How long were you a prosecutor in DeKalb County, and has that helped you transition into being a defense attorney, particularly in DeKalb County?
Yes, absolutely. And I was a prosecutor for 4 years, from 2003 to 2007. And I worked under someone I loved very much, Gwen Keys, who was there, you know, and I would go and I'd say, hey, look, I don't think I can prove this case, or I don't think this guy did it. Mm-hmm. Her response was, well, I hired you because I trust you, so do what you think is right, okay? It wasn't like that when I came back at a later time. She was no longer there. And that's when I realized that this is not what I want to do. You know, back in the day, I would be able to walk in and say, I can't prove this case. I don't have these witnesses, or I don't think this guy did it. You know, and that was it. That was it. You investigated it, Musa? Yes. You researched it? Yes. What does your investigator say? I think they agree with me. Well, then dump it. We don't need to waste our time with it. But now, if anybody gets arrested, now you got to indict them from top to bottom. And this is what I've learned. Okay? It is not a system of justice. It's a system of winning.
Tell me if you agree with my observation about kind of young prosecutors and older prosecutors, young law enforcement officers and older law enforcement officers. This has been my observation. The older the prosecutor, the more reasonable I find them. And the younger the officer, the more idealistic and also more reasonable I find them. When you advance in age as an officer, I feel the type of experience that I have encountered is that the thin blue line, right? It's like, without us, it is absolute anarchy, right? And similarly, the young prosecutors give off that same vibe, that without us, this whole institution collapses. That's been my observation. Have you encountered maybe some of the same things?
You nailed it. That's exactly it. You get a young prosecutor that's idealistic, doesn't really understand the system, and thinks that every criminal defendant needs to be maxed out, needs to be taught the lesson, and they're the ones to be teaching that lesson, right? And there's no perspective there. There's not, you know, They don't understand that these two parties got into an argument and the argument got loud and they were disorderly. They were in the middle of a divorce. They're young. They've probably never even been married, even to know what it's like to be divorced. You know, they have no perspective to understand that this is the way people sometimes behave when they're angry and hurt, and that a jury is going to see that because most of the jurors have been angry and hurt, and they're not going to buy your BS. So that's where I have problems with young prosecutors. The lack of perspective makes it almost impossible. There was a case that I had where I acquitted someone of aggravated sodomy, and that case never should have been brought. And it was just one humiliation to the state after another because the prosecutors just didn't know what they were doing. Now, an older prosecutor would have looked at that case and they would have been like, why aren't you offering probation on this case? Yeah. Are you kidding me? How do you expect me to prove it? I know the victim's upset, but is she going to be more upset when he walks away? Or is she going to be happier to know that something has been done in her favor, right? And that's what you would get with someone with that kind of perspective, because they also understand what the jury's going to think. Now, to loop back to your law enforcement, that's the exact opposite. You know, you get your young cops. I don't know how many TikTok or Instagrams I see where they're hugging kids, or they're taking off their vest and they're breakdancing, or, you know, some kid tells the cop, I could beat you in basketball, and the cop, full uniform, picks up the ball and just starts playing with them, right? You think that's going to happen when you get to a captain who's been there for 15 years and whose experiences are probably jaded by everything that has been going on? They're not right out of the academy now. Now they understand the system. Now they understand the politics, and now they understand that they have to maintain a certain record within their internal affairs file and make sure that the people that they like in their precinct also maintain a record in their internal affairs files, and that will help them advance in the future. And that's where they are. I don't necessarily believe that it is. I do believe that young prosecutors have a benevolent side to their thought process, not to their actions, but to their thought process. I do not believe the same in law enforcement after a certain age and after a certain level of experience.
Is there anything that can be done about that? I mean, you use the word jaded, right? Because of all the experiences that they've had. But at the same time, it's like there's an erosion of trust, not only between the community members and law enforcement, but the other way around. It's like law enforcement can't even begin to trust the civilians, the population that they're entrusted with protecting. Is there anything that can be done about that?
Only way to do it is through training. And that's the only way. But we're focusing our training not on community involvement, rather on community destruction and violence against unarmed civilians. You know, right now, what we're training our officers to do are to become a police state and not to serve and protect. Serving and protecting would mean if you go someplace and you see two people and they're in an argument, right? And it's a situation that can be easily calmed down and you're able to calm it down. That's one thing. The last thing you want to do is take the situation from a level 2 to a level 10. And that's what officers are doing nowadays.
You know, back in the day when I was doing some criminal defense work, I used to go around to various civic organizations, mosques, and nonprofits, right? And give them know your rights presentations. But I'd like to show them these two videos. And I showed them two different videos of DUI checkpoints, okay? And in one video, you don't see the person in the car, you just see the officer, right? The person approaches the DUI checkpoint, and the officer says, have you had anything to drink tonight? And the gentleman says, "What's your name and badge number?" Right? And the officer says, "Have you had anything to drink tonight?" And he says, "I need your name and badge number, and am I free to go?" And the officer repeats, "Have you had anything to drink tonight?" And he says, "Officer, am I free to go?" Right? And that's the exchange for like maybe a full minute, right? The officer gets his sergeant, who is a female sergeant. She says, "We just have to know whether or not you've had anything to drink tonight." And he says, "Sergeant, am I free to go?" And she says, "Have a nice day, sir." And he's left, and he goes, right? Contrast that with another video, and this person comes up to a DUI checkpoint, and he says, "Have you had anything to drink tonight?" And the guy rolls down his window partially. He says, "No, roll your window all the way down." And he says, "Do I have to?" He says, "Park your car right there." And they make him get out of the car, and they do a sniff test. The bottom line is very different reactions, right? Now, you don't really see the speaker, but based on their voice and based on how they speak, one is a middle-aged, in my opinion, middle-aged Caucasian man, probably prior law enforcement, right? Based on what he specifically asks. I think he also asked like precinct, right? Because most people won't ask like which precinct, are you in? And the other one is a 16-year-old African-American boy, right? They respond the same way, but how they're reacted to is vastly different,
I saw the same video.
Yeah.
I saw the same video. And the point is you have to stand your rights.
Yeah.
But there is a way to do it, right?
Yes.
You have to meet law enforcement where they're at. Okay? You can't meet them in a calm, casual, approach if they're not in that calm, casual approach. You have to meet them exactly what level they're at, eye to eye, and you have to meet them with the same level of intensity that they have. And that's how I do it. I will roll down my window partially. I will have my driver's license there, and I will say, "Before you take this, what is your name and badge number? What precinct are you assigned to?" Okay? And then I'll happily hand it to him. I will say, "Before you do anything, before you go back to your car, I consent to no searches of my person or my property." They'll ask me why I say that. And I ask them, "Aren't you an attorney? Aren't you a police officer?" I said, "Well, I'm a former prosecutor, so I know the law. So you need to go ahead and do your job. Let me know why I'm pulled over. And if it is a problem, let's expedite this. We don't need to slow it down. If there's going to be a ticket, give it to me. I'll fight it in court and see you there." And that's really the way that I will approach it. Now, if a law enforcement officer comes to the window and says, "Hey, I had this happen to me one time, and I'm not even going to lie. I love this guy, and I never saw him again, and I don't even know. I was going to get some food. My wife was pregnant. She wanted Wendy's. It was like 11 o'clock at night. I come out of the Wendy's. I got a slushie in one hand. I got fries in the other hand. I'm making the dumbest U-turn in the world, and I get pulled over. And the cop pulls me over and looks at me and sees that I'm not drunk. And literally says to me, "You need to stop driving like an idiot."
Yeah.
And goes back to his car. So I'm thinking something's going to happen.
Yeah.
He gets in his car and he drives away.
Yeah.
Right? He just made it clear to me that, okay, I know you're not intoxicated in any way. Right. You clearly just made a traffic violation. I see you got a lot going on in your car.
Yes.
We're right here. We're going to follow you and make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. Yeah. And that's a totally different interaction.
Correct.
My response to him was, "Yes, sir. I'll stop driving like an idiot." And I was driving like an idiot, and I'm sorry for that. Yeah. So that's how, those are the interactions. You have to meet those people where they're coming to you.
No, you're absolutely right. I've had a similar interaction where it was early Saturday morning. I was just coming from a friend's house, and Saturday morning, so people get drunk Friday night. So I was looking a bit disheveled, and I get stopped, and the police officer comes to my window, and he gets real close, and he says, "Sir, have you had anything to drink tonight?" And I just look at him straight in the eye, and he's about inches away from my face. And I say, "I've never had a drink of alcohol in my life." And he stares at me and he says, "I believe you." Because that's like the most outrageous response, right? Because most people will say, maybe I had 1 or 2 beers or something like that.
Exactly.
But you never had a sip of alcohol in your life? Like, how absurd of a human being are you to never have a drink of alcohol in your life? So, yeah. And then he said, "I believe you." And he's like, "Have a nice day."
You know, sometimes there are people out there like that. And I think, like you said, most of that falls in the younger, more ideological, like, I'm going to help my community type law enforcement officer.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But, you know, there's a lot of things that people realize that these elected positions are elected, right? Yeah. And everything has to determine who's going to get elected or elected again. And their policies change based on that.
Shifting mental gears for a little bit, talking about judges. I once got a ticket, and I went into this judge's courtroom because I didn't know what to do. And this judge comes into this courtroom, and she is super nice. And she's like, "Let's get this resolved. This is going to be a great day." And I was like, "Is this real?" Like, I didn't think judges were like that. And she got it reduced for me. She said, "Hey, don't worry about the fine. You're a college student." And I then became an attorney, and I've been in her courtroom multiple times. And this lady is the most precious, sweetest, kindest lady I've ever seen wear a robe. And what I notice is everybody in her courtroom is the same way. Like the bailiff, the secretary, the assistant, the clerk. It's amazing. And vice versa, I've been in some courtrooms where the judges are very harsh. And similarly, every person in that courtroom is also harsh. Like, it's just unpleasant. And I'm like, wow, this trickles from the top, you know?
Absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. And when you say that it trickles from the top like that, when they put together their staff, they are creating their chambers in their own image, right? And I can tell you, there are a couple judges in Dekalb County that I just absolutely love. I've known them since they were prosecutors, 20 years, you know, so God knows how long. And this goes back to a question you asked about me practicing in Dekalb County. You know, when you know these people when they were lawyers prior to them becoming judges and prosecutors and things like that, you have an inherent trust with these people because they know you. They know whether or not you are a trustworthy person because they've worked with you or not, right? Yeah. They could have liked you or not liked you. Yeah. And in most circumstances, that relationship that you have to build with the prosecutor is already established, and you don't have to do that. And it jumps you a couple of steps ahead in the circumstances.
Credibility is huge. You know, as soon as, if you have credibility with a person, it does go a long way. And I remember a prosecutor in Cobb County, and his officers didn't do something right. And I exposed them, you know, and he says, "Look, when we mess up, we fess up." And I just remember that phrase, you know, and it meant a lot to me that this prosecutor was not, as you had said, just in it to win, right? No, the objective is a just outcome, right? And if you're doing something wrong and you don't play by the book, the most honorable thing you can do is fess up to it. Like that, no, that's not what we're trying to do here. Let's correct this.
System is supposed to be designed to honestly seek the truth, okay?
Yeah.
A defendant has the right to defend himself under all circumstances through whatever means necessary regarding his legal defenses, meaning he has the opportunity to attack warrants warrantless searches, other searches, statements, and things like that. The current circumstance where we are in, we are now looking at it as a defendant goes into a criminal case as guilty with ability to prove their innocence. And
we're doing them a favor for allowing him that opportunity to prove their innocence.
And when I grew up and I was in law school and I was reading, Learned Hand and these amazing, just brilliant Supreme Court justices at the turn of the century, and their quotes are, "Let 1,000,000 or 1,000 guilty men go free, lest one innocent man goes to jail," right? And now we are in a position where we are looking at it as let 1,000 innocent men go to jail, lest one guilty man goes free.
Yeah. And actually that was a turning point for me, that I realized I can't be a prosecutor. I can't have someone over me like that and just dictate my moral conscience. And I just couldn't do it. And so I said, nope, I'm going to do defense work. And I honed in on the moral duty that everyone is entitled to being defended and afforded a righteous trial. And so with whatever allegation there may be, and I stuck to that, no, you have a right to a fair trial. I mean, I don't know if you're innocent or if you're guilty, but I sure know that we're not gonna allow the prosecutor to give us a hunch that you're guilty, or maybe suspect that you're guilty. We're gonna make them prove their case, and if it's proven, and a jury comes to the conclusion that yes, that case has been proven, then so be it. Now, my wife disagrees. She's like, no, you're not gonna defend every single case, okay? And so there are cases that she did not allow me to take. But you know what they say, happy wife, happy life. So
absolutely. That was that. And it's, to me, it's gotten difficult because now the cases that I get are usually very serious cases. When you start talking about, I'm looking for a homicide lawyer, there's 5-6 names that come up in the Atlanta area. And most of those people have been practicing 20 plus years. Okay. Right. And the reason that you see that is you can take a lawyer with 20, 25 years experience in the criminal field and not give him a shred of information, and have them go up against a prosecutor who has been working on the case for a year but has never tried a case before. And you will see the difference in just the procedure, the flow, the narrative, and how everything goes. You will see the difference between that. And it will make a huge difference. And that level of experience is something that is really invaluable when it comes to trying cases, just because you've done it so many times before.
So that's a really good point that you bring out. But how does a prospective client make that assessment, right? So somebody is trying to figure out, hey, I need someone to help me with this case. And I have 3 attorneys to choose from, okay? And it's so difficult putting our skill set into a product, right? It's not like something that you can pick off of a shelf that you can examine, you can hold, you can read its specifications, you can compare it to other products on the shelf. This is all, invisible. How does a client make a good decision on who to hire?
It's like getting a physician. Okay. There's something that ails you, and you need to find the best person to help you resolve that problem. If you have stage 4 cancer and you're dying and you go into a physician and the physician looks at you and goes, what do you want me to do? You're going to be dead in 2 weeks anyways. Or you go to a physician that says, this is a dire situation, but I've fought with people who've been in dire situations before, and I will do everything I can to get you one more day. who are you going to go with? The person that you trust, right? You already know the situation you're in. You want the person that is going to be the one that's going to defend you the best. And you're only going to know that by meeting with the person, by talking to the person, and by getting their background and their history. So, for example, if someone were to look me up, I'm fortunate enough to have had experiences in very high-profile cases and in various jurisdictions because I'm licensed in various jurisdictions. So if you were to look me up, my body of work kind of speaks for itself. You would be talking to me just to determine if I was enough of a nice guy or if I had the personality that would mesh with you. Mm-hmm. I think that's what you need to do is you need to make sure, okay, these people have the experience that I want. Let me talk to them and see which one is the one that's best for me. And if you come to me, I might say, this, I might not be the best fit for you. Maybe there is. I was talking to this other lawyer, they'll say, and I'll say, well, that's fine. Most importantly is that you get the best representation, not that you hire me, that you get the representation you want, because that is ultimately what our profession is about. It's about Rule 1.2. It's about taking care of your client. It's about being dedicated to your client. And it's about having faith and trust and having your client be able to have faith and trust for you.
Is there a situation where, or a type of case that you just would not take, regardless of, maybe the amount of information that just an allegation that you're like, I can't take this?
Yeah, I can tell you that my mind has changed on that, and it's not what you think. I would not take a RICO case. I'll tell you why. A RICO case is the ability for the state to just go in, fish, find whatever they want, investigate whatever they want, use whatever they want to prove a case, make it almost impossible to defend, and make it last years in court. And you're just stuck there. And your client, who sold one bag of weed and never met the guy at the top of the pyramid, is just as culpable as the guy who's charged with 30 murders at the top of the pyramid. The abuse of this RICO statute has created the ability for the state to do things the law never intended for them to do.
So just talk a little bit more about what RICO is for those who may have not heard that acronym before.
RICO is basically a racketeering and organized crime bill, right? This was designed in order to charge the top level of the mafia with the same crime that the lowest level guy did, and to make it all a part of a big conspiracy. We have two ways to do it in the state of Georgia. One of them is the RICO statute. The other one is the gang statute. They're basically the same. And those are designed to make it easier to prove cases against people without the evidence. And that's how they do it. This was designed for major organized crime. Mm-hmm. This was a federal bill that was designed many years ago when the mafia was a significant influence on the American economy and the American crime syndicate throughout the country. It has now been used to arrest a rapper because somebody in his video might have committed a crime. Arrest a rapper because one of his songs talks about violence. It's gotten to the point where it has worn the rights of the defendant down to a level that really, if the state wants to get you, they just will.
What about cases? What are your most common cases that you work on? Or is there a specific type of case that you feel like that's the case that's my specialty?
At this point, I would say capital offenses have become my specialty. Usually there's a lot of question of fact in those cases. And there are some very interesting questions of law. I have, for example, a homicide case where there was a confidential informant. And they're not going to let me know who that confidential informant is or anything like that. And they're saying that they have a right. Well, I felt that there was an area in the law that allowed me to speak and to go forward on it. So I filed a motion under the theory that this confidential informant is unavailable. So if you want to keep him a secret, keep him a secret. Let me depose him under seal, right? Trying to use some of the prosecutorial ideas that I had, because I know when you can depose people as a prosecutor, and I know how to, interpret that. And so when I'm able to do things like that in this serious level of cases, immediately the judges look at the person as okay, this guy knows what he's doing. All right, we're not going to be messing around with this attorney. We're not going to be telling him to move on. We're not going to be telling him to hurry up his cross-examination. Clearly, this guy knows what he's talking about, and I'm not going to put myself in a position where he's going to create an appellate issue. So I've been doing it now for so long that that's what I'm best at. That's what I'm best at. Usually capital offenses and very serious cases.
What about, is there a specific jurisdiction? I know you were a prosecutor in DeKalb County, but is that pretty much anywhere?
I travel anywhere for these cases. I don't really have an issue. If someone wants me there, I'll be there. I had cases out in Whitfield County. I've had cases in Savannah. I've tried serious cases in all 5 metro counties. For example, I acquitted Sheriff Victor Hill back in 2014. And that was the case that you were talking about at the very beginning, when there were cameras on me and things like that. Those were the days, that was young and starting. But those days have put me in a position now to be able to take these more serious cases. Now, go ahead.
Yes. I wanted to shift topics right quick to something that you and I share. Well, we talk about this often on our social media platforms, and that is the issue of Palestine. We're both Palestinian.
Yes, we are.
And you are a Palestinian Christian. I'm a Palestinian Muslim, but I feel that probably a lot of those that are listening didn't even know Palestinian Christians exist. So it's like, what do you mean Palestinian Christians? So could you just talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's people aren't really informed of the area there. They don't quite understand. I don't understand how Christians don't realize that there are Christians in the Christian Holy Land. That's something that very much bothers me. And it bothers the priests that are there. Having attended Mass at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, I can assure you there are Christians in the Christian Holy Land. Okay? Let's be clear about that. Yeah. There are different sections. These sections have been created by the war. Essentially, it was all Palestine, and now we have 2 areas where the Palestinians reside, one in Gaza and one in the West Bank. You'll find more Christians in the West Bank, and I think the reason for that is because when they closed off Gaza at the time, there was nobody going in and out, and most of the population in Gaza at the time was Muslim. So as a result, you have a bifurcated area, 2 communities that are separate from one another, one community that has more Christians than the other, but there are Christians in Gaza too. The oldest Christian church in the world is in Gaza, and people don't understand that. They don't understand that the Christians there and the Muslims there have a brotherhood, that the culture itself is the Palestinian culture. The issue of being veiled, for example, this is something that people say exclusively to Muslim women. This is not true. This is not true. In the past, the Christians, and especially the Christians in the Holy Land to this day, they still are veiled. And even the Jewish people, the Orthodox people, they're still veiled. So there's clearly media saturation to make you believe certain things that aren't true about the region. And I find it very disturbing. And I think my Lord Jesus Christ would also find it disturbing, as he was a Palestinian Jew at some point. So to tell him that there are no Christians in the region, that's pretty insulting. But this is something that has been used to divide us, not us, you and me, but the Christians and Muslims. It's been used to divide the West Bank people and the people in Gaza. And it's It's not working anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I think it in a very, interesting and divine decree type of way. The more propaganda has attempted to kind of cloak what is going on in Gaza and in Palestine, the more it has backfired, and now people are seeing more and more what is going on. Like, what we have learned about Israel is really not what's the truth.
Exactly. And the advent of cameras, social media, cell phones, they have ripped the veil off of the Iron Curtain, and you can see exactly what's happening there. And it's to the point now where trillions of dollars of propaganda can't undo what the world has witnessed.
I have an interesting question for you that just occurred to me. So we're very vocal about Palestine. We're very vocal about what is going on there, and we are proponents of a lasting ceasefire. But even beyond that, because that's not the end goal. The end goal is ending the occupation.
Just an independent Palestinian state's the end goal. Anything less than that's a failure.
And the way some people have tried to show their support is boycotting organizations that support this apartheid state, right? One of which that's very popular is Starbucks. Okay, so my sister actually, she's also very vocal. She's an Awad. They're all. And she asked me an interesting question. She said, what would you say to people that may not know a bunch about what is going on there, but you're wanting to know. They are wanting to know more about what is going on, but they really don't know how to address it. And you yourself don't want to be too aggressive because you see them drinking their Starbucks coffee every morning, oblivious to kind of what is going on. And she was looking for a palatable, delicate way of discussing this with colleagues. And you know what they say about workplace conversations don't discuss religion and politics, right? It's not polite. But we have a genocide that is going on. And it's incumbent upon us, right, to talk about this because more people need to know. What would your advice be how to approach a conversation like that?
Oh, I have had this exact same situation, and I always explain it very simple. Yeah. I say that I'm a socially conscious investor. I invest not just for the purposes of gratification and to make money, but I do it with a social conscience. So these things that I boycott because it's been proven that they support things that I don't agree with. Okay? Mm-hmm. And as a result, I choose not to use them. And so when it comes up and someone's drinking coffee, a Starbucks, and they say, "Can I get you anything from Starbucks?" I'll say, "No, I'm a socially conscious investor. I don't believe in what they believe in as a corporate entity." That always starts a conversation. Well, what do you mean? What do they believe in as a corporate entity? And then you start explaining to them the speeches made by Howard Schultz, and then all of a sudden, they don't even know who Howard Schultz is. Then they're Googling Howard Schultz, and they're like, holy cow, that much money has been invested in the genocide of the Palestinian people? And that's when you start realizing it. So I always tell people, I'm a socially conscious investor. And as a result, I will not use SodaStream. I will not drink Coca-Cola. I will not eat McDonald's. I will not drink Starbucks.
Yeah.
But that's not because I'm boycotting Israel. It's because I'm socially conscious and I'm boycotting everything bad. Whether I boycott whatever chicken company because I don't like the way they keep their chickens. That's a socially conscious investor. I don't like the way Starbucks promotes. I don't like the way Hewlett-Packard invests in the cybersecurity of Palestinian people and the registration of Palestinians in Gaza. So I won't buy their computers.
Yeah. That's a great response. Socially conscious investor. That's amazing. What are some final words you can share with us? I know we've been going about 45 minutes, but is there anything specific you'd like to share, whether or not it's criminal defense related or what's going on in Palestine related? Just give us your final thoughts.
Well, I have a couple of thoughts right now, and it's I want people to understand the erosion of your rights.
Mm-hmm.
And this issue with Palestine is a microcosm of the erosion of your rights. When boycotting genocide is the crime and cheering genocide is the victory, you really have to have some introspective. And we have to take a look at ourselves with mindfulness. And we have to realize, what has the proliferation of our democracy doing to the rest of the world? And does the rest of the world need to necessarily live like we do? That has permeated into this country to the point where each individual has lost rights, slowly but surely. Each one of your constitutional rights are eroding, and they have been for the last 25 years, and I've witnessed it with my own eyes. Okay? So if you don't believe it, I'm telling you, it's happening. I've seen it. I've already given you examples of how it's happening, and it's only getting worse. Protect yourself. Vote to protect your rights.
Phenomenal. Thank you. Thank you so much. Attorney Musa Ghanayem in Brookhaven, criminal defense attorney extraordinaire. Thank you for being on here. We really appreciate all of your wisdom, your thoughts, and feelings. Thank you.
I'm so honored. Thank you. Bye-bye, guys.